Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Probably don't need this, but okay. So what we're going to do tonight is try to cover several different topics associated with Eagles Island. And we got several different things to actually talk about. And one of the things that we wanted to do was give you a flavor, if you will, for Eagles Island. And there's a lot to talk about here. I mean, we could spend hours and hours doing this, but we thought that what we could do is show you a little bit of the history, a little bit of the environmental beauty of the area. Also talk to you about some of the maritime history, the rice culture, the Gullah Geechee. And then we want to talk to you a little bit at the end to actually talk about possibility of getting people out there and experiencing the place. Because just hearing about it or reading it in a book or something, it's not the same. I promise you it's so much better being out there, and touching it and feeling it and sensing it as we go. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to talk to you about a little bit of history and the environment. And I love maps. And this is one of the most simple maps, but one of the best maps I've ever seen, as a matter of fact. And that's Eagles Island. You see it? It's surrounded by water. It's an island. And so there's Leland over there. And then you got Eagles Island. So you go Leland, the Brunswick River, then Eagles Island, and the Cape Fear River, and then there's Wilmington. And that piece that's sitting right in the middle of Eagles Island is called the Causeway. Those of us who grew up in this area still call it the Causeway. That was the path for transporting all the goods and services from Brunswick County across Eagles Island to Wilmington, across the ferry, to actually be sent around the world. And so that's really important. So I'm going to also talk to you about the ecology environment a little bit. And then Mark's going to come up and talk to you about the maritime history. Now, he's going to concentrate primarily, I think, on the area on the east side of Eagles Island in the Cape Fear River. But there's all kinds of things associated with the history of this area. And in fact, there was a shipyard on Eagles Island, lots of wharves, lots of piers, and just lots and lots of history that you'll hear about from Mark. And then Askew is going to come up and talk to you about rice culture. And of course, all of you know where the corridor is for the Gullah Geechee. Runs from Florida up to North Carolina, and we're at the north end of that. And so all those straight lines that you see that Mother Nature did not make, but humans made, are all part of the rice canals that Askew is going to tell you all about. And then I'm going to come back at the very end. You have to get with me again. It's at the very end to talk to you about some of the ways that we're going to be looking at this for establishing paddle trails in here. It's already been done a little bit, but we want to take it to the next step and include this as part of what we would consider the nature park idea for Eagles Island. So just to make sure everybody knows exactly where we're looking at, this is a picture from, by the way, this is the Coastal Dynamics Lab that everybody has talked about and you've heard about and referenced on this. Andy Fox and his team did a fantastic job of putting information together on this. But the real important thing of this is that we can use this to show people the beauty of the area and explain to people, what the highlights really are. So this is just showing you Eagles Island. Dredgefoil Island is right here on the southern end. That's the Army Corps of Engineers when they clean out the river through deepening and soil management to keep the port open. Some of it's put up there. And then on the northern part of the island, that's where we're most interested in. This is the marsh area where the rice culture is currently. And of course, the beauty of this too is that we want to highlight that Wilmington, but also Navassa, Leland, and Belleville are all equal partners in all this, and we want everybody to be involved to make this a success story. And so whenever you look at this, that nature park idea that you see down in the lower right is what I'm going to end up with, as a matter of fact. So Eagles Island is about 3,000 acres. About 1,400, give or take, is the dredge spoil part. So we've still got 1,600 acres to work with for considering for our nature park idea. Eagles Island itself is about 25 miles from the mouth of the river. It's at the upper end of the estuary, what we call the lower Cape Fear River estuary. And of course, that same 25 miles is what's currently being considered for the port deepening that we're all talking about and listening to. So the other thing that we've got in this is there's really varied ownership. This part in here, there is Ports Authority. In fact, this is one of the mitigation areas for the port deepening if it goes through. And we've got private ownership like the McLaughlin Trap. This is tract. This is a really nice piece of property up here. Soil and Water that some of us own. I see Matt in the audience back here at Colligan. So Soil and Water, has control of these things. And by the way, just about all of this is in Brunswick County. There's very little that's actually New Hanover County. But it turns out that an important piece right in here is something that would be very valuable to us to consider for educational spot. So that's one of the things that we're going to be considering going forward and working with folks now to see. So this is a really important picture. This tells you exactly why Wilmington was developed and Eagles Island wasn't. So red is high, blue is low. So when you look at that, what you can see is over on the other side, Belleville, Leland, and Navassa, there are elevations of 20 to 30 feet. And the benefit of Wilmington was by the time you get up to 3rd Street, you're at 30 to 35 feet of elevation. The other thing, you had fresh water in that area. So those two things led to the development of Wilmington. And when you look at this, you can see also that area down in there, that's high because that is the area for the Army Corps site. So little history really quick. First appeared on maps in 1671 as Cranes Island. It's been called lots of things. In fact, I love this one from Ebenezer Hazard. He called it a dismal, swampy island fit for buzzards and herons, but nothing else. And it gained its real name, Eagles Island, from Richard Eagles from Charleston, South Carolina. Came up here and started rice plantations up and down the river with lots of other folks. And there's 2 rice plantations, maybe 3, that's on Eagles Island, Bleak House and also Osawatomie. Now, the yields of rice in our area are nothing like what's in South Carolina, but still was an important crop for us. And in fact, in looking at that, those are 2 of the maps. Told you I love maps. So this thing that you can see on the left, you can't see the actual names of them, but there's 65 plantations from the lower part of the estuary going all the way up into the Northeast Cape Fear River and the Cape Fear River that's there. And if you look around our area, what you can see is all the ones that's just around Eagles Island there. And then those are the ones that were on Eagles Island itself that we've got. And that's just showing you what you've got down here going all the way across. So Carolina Gold rice is what's the thing. And by the way, if you want to give a great Christmas present, you can now buy Carolina Gold rice. It's an easy thing to do and give that away. That's what we gave last Christmas for all the relatives. Another piece of history, 1800s, Wilmington was the naval stores capital of the entire world up until the Civil War. Lots of naval stores commodities, resin, pitch, tar, turpentine. And it's also got the Berry Shipyard was on there. And in fact, the Ironclad in North Carolina was constructed on that. Wasn't much of a sailing vessel, but it looked really dangerous. So they stuck it out in the middle of the place for fear factor. The other thing that you got on this is the ferries operated between Eagles Island and Wilmington. And Eagles Island really went down after naval stores went by the wayside, and also, just Wilmington growing and growing. By the way, Wilmington was, till the middle 1900s, the biggest city in North Carolina. So if you look at This is that same map that I showed you. It's just not one that was pulled out of the air and I drew it, on the side. This is a publication said the island in the Cape Fear River lays in the manner here described. The island's a swamp. The road, which is, the one I showed you going through the causeway, is laid with logs of trees to be able to get across that. And what you can see in this picture is that the ferries there going from all those barrels, which are naval stores, and on the other side of the river is Wilmington. And then you come across and Eagles Island, right there, this is one of the tar pitch turpentine areas in that zone of Eagles Island, right on the banks. And a lot of this was put over on Eagles Island because turns out it smells bad, but it's also dangerous. Fires, you can have explosions. And so the people in Wilmington wanted it to be across the river on Eagles Island for a lot of the naval stores materials. So this is the causeway. You think it's wet? And by the way, the causeway was only a 2-lane narrow road whenever I was a kid out there. It's changed quite a bit over the years. And here you can see how the causeway actually went from over here at Leland, across Eagles Island, to a ferry, and then across. By the way, there were no bridges across until 1929. So ferry traffic till 1929 is what got you from Brunswick County to Wilmington in there. And of course, I just quickly wanted to show what some of the commodities are for this area. This was what was shipped out of Wilmington on a particular ship. You can see here in 1860, the population of 9,500, 5,200 white, the others were enslaved. And the economy that you see here, and that's, by the way, Market Street in the day. And so naval stores that were shipped, 37,000 barrels of turpentine, tar, and others. Lumber, longleaf and cypress, rice, not a whole lot compared to South Carolina, but still an important commodity for us. And then late in the 1800s, tobacco and cotton actually started being the big products. Well, let's go to some of the environmental stuff. You see all the green? Those are wetlands. Those are low areas. So everything on Eagles Island is basically a wetland area. There's a few dredge spoil areas and forested areas, but most all of it's all marshes. And so when you look at that, you say, well, what good is that? Is it just a haunt for herons and buzzards? Well, it's really not, because North Carolina Natural Heritage actually designated this area and the floodplain area in New Hanover and Brunswick County as North Carolina's significant natural areas. And the reason that is because it supports the largest area of tidal freshwater marsh habitat in North Carolina. It's very diverse. It's high biodiversity, as a matter of fact. And one of the things that we have are what's called freshwater marsh oligohaline. That just means it's got 0.5 to 5 parts per thousand saline water, so slightly brackish. And then we got freshwater areas that's less than 0.5 parts per thousand. That's what the PPT is. And within there, we have really high quality habitat and terrestrial and aquatic areas for people to go and see and love. And the animals and plants really love it. It's a fantastic place to be. So Eagles Island, the history of landscape was done back earlier in like 2010, 10-ish. And this shows you some of the data, and this is some of the kinds of environmental stuff we've got from primary nursery grounds all the way up onto these dredge spoil areas. So I'm going to just quickly run through these because we don't have time to go into detail, but I wanted to show you some of that diversity. And this is just showing you some of the plants. When you see this OBL, that's obligate and facultative wet, all that means is these are plants that love to have wet feet. Okay? So they grow in the wetland area. And you can see that most of these are adapted to that kind of a setting. Then we've got mammals, reptiles. I know you all love alligators and water moccasins. So some of my favorite critters. And so those are all over out there. And so all of these are different kinds of species that we have, to view when we go out. Lots of fish. And because we have this changing water, we actually have slightly saltwater and slightly freshwater fish. So we get a mix. And this area is very important because it's also a primary nursery ground. Now, one of the things that you see down in the bottom is not a fish, it's a blue crab. And I'm showing that because blue crabs don't stay in fresh water, right? But blue crabs are now found north of Wilmington. And that's because of deepening of the river and raising of sea level slightly. The saline waters have moved further up the river than what they used to be. So we have a changing estuary, is what I would say. And just very quickly, just look at that. Eagles Island is entirely surrounded by that red, and what that red is primary critical nursery grounds. These are really critical for all kinds of species. These are forage and habitat for our little guys. And so the old thing of wetlands and seafood, well, these kinds of areas are the ones that really supply all that need for all those animals. And by the way, number one over there, that's the Brunswick River. In fact, that's the bridge that goes over the Brunswick River. So they caught a sturgeon, and they're actually tagging him so that we can know, where they're moving back and forth in. This is Jot Owens, a captain in a striped bass tournament. He caught that right there at number 2. By the way, Cape Fear River, you can catch them, but you can't keep them. It's a catch and release in this area because striped bass are not at numbers that we can sustain. And then, just to give you a little hint, if you don't know, the point at Point Peter right there is a good place to fish. Okay? So there's thing, as you can see right there. And of course, got to have our birds, lots and lots of waterfowl as well as many others to look at. And I guarantee you'll see many of these if you go out there on any paddle trip that you go for. So let me just get to the end of my part so I can turn it over to the real talks here. So what you've got in looking at this is a picture looking south. You can see the state port in the background, the Brunswick River, 1774-76 causeway in the middle ground, and also Alligator Creek. Alligator Creek is one of the ones I'll show you later, is one of the places where we'll have a paddle trail, as a matter of fact. And all of these are what Oski is going to talk to you about with the rice canals. It's amazing stuff to actually be able to see. So let me leave you, though, with a couple of stressors that we've got for the area. There's a couple of stressors that we got that's going to be impacting Eagles Island and has been impacting Eagles Island for many years. Main one of those is sea level. Just like in the port deepening study, sea level is the biggest thing, the biggest issue associated with port deepening and what's going to be happening. So we're going to have by 2050 a 1-foot rise, by 2070 a 2-foot rise, and by 2100 a 3-foot rise of water up the Cape Fear River. And so that's going to change things. The other one that has a little bit of effect is port deepening. And what's going to happen with that, according to the new study, says it's going to be about a 1 to 3 part per thousand change in salinity up at Wilmington because of that deepening. And so what that does is changes the vegetation that we've got. And then others, this is the bridge construction. I just put this in here. This was when they were building the Memorial Bridge in 1969. You had to remove all the muck, all that beautiful wetlands, because if you put a road on it, it would just sink. So what they did was they dug out the mud, all the marsh stuff, and filled it in with fill material to stabilize that road. And of course, the other one I've got up here, you've heard about the rail realignment, because the rail goes around Wilmington. You hear it at nighttime if you listen. And so as it goes around, well, they want to realign that. And so they want to bring it across Eagles Island and down to the port. And it says there, I'll be dead. So that one's not going to be impacting, two things, very soon for us. That's going to be a while. So everything on Eagles Island is about water. And you've probably heard about the Living with Water project for the battleship. And what they did in this case is the battleship floods. Not the battleship, but the park and the roadway. And so what they did was they raised the parking area by 2 feet. They constructed some wetlands in here to help stabilize some of the stormwater. The only problem is the road's still low. And so the road still floods. So this is an issue going forward for everybody. But the parking lot has actually worked. That's what it looks like in process right there. Okay, so I hope I've given you kind of a flavor of some history and the environment. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and I'll talk about the maritime area. So, Mark.